Open Tobias Harris, and Tobias drills it! Sixers up one!
Embiid fakes, Embiid down the lane!
What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the Pick Swap Media YouTube channel. My name is Sean Barnard, as always, and we're back with some more draft coverage, taking a look at another prospect today, this guy being Isaiah Collier. This is a bit more another guy that's a bit of a controversial prospect in this year's draft. You certainly see the highs and lows in his game when you watch him play. I will say I sat through a couple USC games this year. They were a tough watch by the end of the year, really an organizational just collapse throughout the season. A team that had much higher aspirations than turned out to be the case. They ultimately ended up missing out on the NCAA tournament, finished with a record below 500. And I do think a lot of those factors had to do directly with Isaiah Collier, both in the handle of it was not an ideal situation for him. And he also wasn't able to elevate the team in the way that I think it was hoped. But I do want to dive into some of the takeaways from his game, his skill set, how I think things translate to the NBA level, and everything else involving him, as well as looking at some highlights to take a look at things. So let's start off by diving into his stats here. That, as you can see on the season, a one-and-done guy, a guy that was a highly touted recruit, a guy that was even had some conversation about being in play for the #1 overall pick during a portion of the season. He averaged 16.3 points per game, 4.3 assists, 2.9 rebounds, 1.5 steals per game, which I like quite a bit. Shot 49% from the field overall, just 33.8% from beyond the three-point line on 3 attempts per game, which is a lower sample size than I would like to see there. And perhaps even more concerning, 67.3% free throw shooter on 5.8 attempts per game. That is not a strong indicator for the shooting, and the shooting is probably going to be the largest swing skill that we will talk about with Isaiah Collier. I'll also put decision-making up there because I think he plays out of control far too often for my personal comfortability. If I had to put like kind of a player comparison on him right now before I pull up this film, he reminds me a lot of like year one Jaden Ivey at Purdue. That the skill set, the athleticism, the physicality is all absolutely there, but it still feels like he's adjusting to the pace of play. Sometimes he puts his head down and drives in situations when he shouldn't. He doesn't seem to have as great of a feel as a playmaker as I would like, but there's certainly plenty of reason to believe that he can grow into a better basketball player. So let's start off by taking a look at these highlights. And the first thing that's going to jump out the page here is just this downhill athleticism, this speed that he probably, as far as straight line speed and getting downhill, is probably the scariest player in this draft when it comes to this. That there is a determination when he puts his head downhill, uses his speed. Just look at the way that he gets downhill, weaves in and out. It's really impressive stuff. That athletic burst that he has, you cannot teach that. And that is a large reason why the floor is higher on him than a lot of these guys. He does play with a nice level of intensity. I did notice that in his game. That's always something I tend to pay attention to, that I like guys that wear their emotions on their sleeve a little bit, that are fired up, that are competing on a night-to-night basis. And I do think that's particularly impressive with USC, considering as a team they did underperform this year. And I will note, while I'm not overly high on Isaiah Collier, that he's not a guy that I have in my top 10 or really near that conversation, to be perfectly honest, which I see some people do. He is a dude that I think, like, I probably have a sour taste of it that I think is necessarily the case. That when I went back and looked at some of the box scores prepping for this video here, I do think I ended up catching some of his worst games, which it is what it is. That's the luck of the draw when you're flipping on the TV and USC is on the channel there. So not necessarily going to hold it against him as strongly as maybe I should. But the bottom line is, when talking about where this guy projects at the NBA level, I'm a little bit concerned about the potential role. That I fear he might fall into that category of a guy who is not quite good enough off ball as a floor spacer or dynamic enough that he can be threatening to defenses to space the floor adequately. That I'm a little concerned that when the ball is not in his hand, what does this guy do? Now, this pass is interesting here. I also struggle when talking about the on-ball conversation. I'm not ready to commit to believing that he's good enough to be a true point guard. And I get like true point guards to some extent are going extinct in the NBA, that there's not as traditional positions. Like, I just struggle to see the playmaking gift that he has. That at times, I mean, of course, he still makes proper passes, still plays adequate basketball, and still averaged 4.3 assists per game this year. But it didn't feel like he was able to pass guys open or create looks ahead of the flow of the game in a way that you see from some of the more advanced passers. And when projecting how I think this guy shakes out, I do believe that he's going to end up as more of a primary creator, that I don't see really a role as him being a two guard. He does stand around 6'5", which is some good size there. I do love everything about his frame, his size, his athleticism. This play right here is probably one of the better passes that I've seen from him. A good full court read where he's tossing it over to the opponent's head. That's a really nice pass. That is the stuff that if you can build off that type of thing, then we're talking about a little bit of a different conversation. But I just don't quite see he's there yet. And this is the stuff, these are the flashes that are going to get you bought in on Isaiah Collier. That just look at the way he gets downhill. I'm going to rewind this. Look at him weave through two defenders, take the screen. That's really tough to stop. And I do think that is a level of athletic pop that will translate to the NBA level. That he is a dude who's absolutely quick twitch. I know I threw out Jaden Ivey as a player comp. I'm not going to go as far as saying like Ja Morant, but there's a little bit of that kind of determination when he does attack the basket. He certainly is not afraid to take a guy on, and he's also got some really impressive, like, tough finishes. Like, that's another perfect example here. Look at the way he goes up, goes down, and kisses this off the glass here. This is a really advanced, tough finish. That is beautiful, beautiful stuff right there. Now, the other side of the coin there is he's also, let's take a little freeze here when I talk about the decision-making. See, he gets downhill. We're talking about him taking on two guys directly with the other three lurking. Now, granted, there's not a guy in the corner behind him here. There isn't really a pass for him to be making. This is going back to the conversation by USC was not as complete as a team as they should have been. But you could argue that this isn't the highest IQ basketball shot, although it goes in. So 2 points are 2 points in my mind. So that one I don't have a problem with, but that is a little bit of the processing concerns that I do see with him, that it doesn't feel like he quite is up to reading the game. That is something that some guys are capable of learning throughout time, and some guys aren't. That we see guys that throughout their career don't quite have the basketball IQ that you would hope for. I don't think Collier is in that category. I do think that he is a guy that is teachable, that he will improve in these areas, but I don't think he has that natural instinct as a playmaker, as a point guard, which I do think is a little bit limiting to his overall ceiling. A couple other weaknesses that I did want to point out. The shooting's a real conversation here, that through this season, from beyond the three-point line, 33.8% on attempts per game. I don't think the shot looks bad. I don't think there's mechanical concerns, but sometimes that's a little bit worse, that if there's not a clean fix and the efficiency's still not quite there, and that free throw percentage is especially concerning to me. If he's not shooting at least 70%, and it was 67.3% on this year, at the rate that he's going to want to attack the rim, put rim pressure on opposing teams, that's going to be an issue. That is something that will keep him off the floor if he is not good enough at that. Now, he's going to be an NBA player. I do think he's going to improve as a free throw shooter. I don't think this is a crazy ask, but still a little side note when talking about projecting him as a shooter, that you would like to see better numbers from that at the charity stripe there. So that free throw percentage absolutely has to go up. That is an area of the floor or a shot that I expect him to get to a lot at the rate that he drives, with the way that he likes to get downhill. Isaiah Collier is going to be a common free throw shooter. That we're going to see that. So you have to make sure you're punishing teams when you're getting to the free throw line, not the other way around of them punishing you by letting you give away free points. And here's a great look at some of his physicality here. Look at the way he uses his body to just get the defender off him. And obviously not the highest level of competition against Brown here. You can see the size difference between Collier and that specific defender there. But I do love the way he drives right at his chest and then still gets to his spot. That's excellent stuff there. That's the type of thing that does give me optimism about him. And as I mentioned with the shot, it doesn't look horrible. And I think he's honestly a little more comfortable when he gets into the pull-up, which is always an interesting conversation to have. We see this both ways. The catch and shoot stuff, that one looked pretty clean. I like that there. I could argue maybe the release point a little bit lower than I would like to be the case. It does feel like, particularly on the catch and shoot opportunities. And here's a nice contrast where he has a catch and shoot look on this from a corner three. That's a big time shot that would be nice if he's hitting at a regular rate at the NBA level. Here's him getting into a little dribble push up, little tween, step back, pull. I do think he looks much more natural when shooting off those type of things. It feels like he thinks about the catch and shoot threes a little, which we've seen. That's not uncommon. That happens with a lot of guys, but something certainly to note and will be a major swing skill in how he projects at the NBA level. These types of passes are what he also needs to continue to improve on. That when you can start leveraging your drive as a playmaker, that is when you become a dangerous athlete or a dangerous basketball player. And look at the way he gets downhill, draws all the defense, and kicks out for an open three. If he can do this at a regular rate, there is absolutely a high-level spot in the NBA for Isaiah Collier, but we got to make sure that is the case and happening. So I know I mentioned Jaden Ivey would be my most common player comparison here. Seen a little bit of Tyreek Evans in his game. I've seen some comparisons there. I would agree with that. I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I think ultimately Collier is a guy that still probably hears his name in the top 18. I think he's likely a lottery pick. I do think there will be a team that takes a chance on him. That athletic pop is something that is too special to pass up completely in my mind. Speaking from the perspective of the Philadelphia 76ers at 16, I'm not interested in Isaiah Collier for that pick. There's guys that I like better that I think can be more complementary pieces. The Devin Carter still maintains the pole position for what my rankings are from the Sixers perspective, but I do think Collier is a guy that will figure things out at the NBA level. That I think there's very much a world where he ends up looking like a better NBA player than he did in college for the variety of reasons there. As I mentioned, with what a mess that USC was, we saw the coach resign at the end of the year. A lot was going on that overall things just did not click as was hoped. So we may not have had the best lens to view Isaiah Collier through, and I do think that we will see a difference come at the NBA level. So there are legitimate concerns in his game. The biggest swing skills I'll throw at his shooting and at his decision making as a playmaker are probably the top two there. I understand those are big ask and pretty broad terms, but he's got to find that balance between how can I create for myself? Can I be a true point guard? And I do think that he needs to find a way to make that the case for him to have a long-term sustainable NBA career. The bottom line is, though, I'm still buying it. I still think that he can. I think there's enough there to work with. The raw athleticism, the speed, the body that he has, that's stuff that is going to be very appealing to teams, and a reason why I do think that he will still hear his name called in the lottery in this year's draft. So let me know what you guys think of Isaiah Collier. Drop any player comparisons that you have. I do love hearing them, all those types of things for each of these guys. So let them fly in the comments. Make sure you're subscribing to Pick Swap Media if you have not just yet. And we will be continuing to rip through draft prospects throughout the process. Also, stay tuned. We'll have a couple more Sixers-specific type breakdowns. So stay posted for all that. Make sure you're clicking a like on the video. And I'll be talking with you next time right here on Pick Swap Media. Peace.